Quick disclaimer, although with many pieces of the puzzle lining up with Shubble's story, along with Wilbur's terrible apology that confirms he was the person she was speaking about, I will still refer to all of this as alleged because it's technically still a he say she say situation, despite the narrative being clearly painted as Wilbur not being a good guy. Also, I posted for the first time in ages on Insta. If you're suffering from ED, go in my description. One look at my face will have that cured. Throughout the years, nature has dealt us with a lot of predators, from lions to bears to snakes to a freshwater snail. Out in the wild wilderness, we're not as safe as we think. However, one predator sits on top of the food chain, and that is the Minecraft YouTuber. I don't know what it seems to be, but in the last decade, for some reason, these family-friendly Minecraft channels have spawned from the worst part of humanity. We've reached a time where a Minecraft convention has a faster way of getting rid of kids than an abortion clinic, because all the YouTubers will snatch them. I understand there is a lot of good actions, furthermore people from that community. It just sucks when the few bad apples in the basket have to be the biggest ones as well, spoiling the entire reputation of the community as a whole to the public's perception. Gen Z went through some hard battles seeing the turnout for Lion Maker and Sky Does Minecraft. Sadly, history seems to be repeating itself for Gen Alpha, where they're starting to learn that half the time you say a sentence with a Minecraft YouTuber, they're most likely in jail serving one. Despite me being a century late to talk about today's topic, or Yeasty Beast, is Wilbur Soot. He was a Minecraft YouTuber turned musician with around 6 million subscribers. He had quite the music catalog as well. Personally, I would rather hear the sound of two old people fucking than to play a second of a YouTuber song, especially from the Minecraft realm. I mean, let's be honest, Mask by Dream could be documented as a hate crime because of how awful it is. You know, he had a little discography of his own. One song about him crying about not being able to wear cat ears and getting horny whenever he looks at car windows.
It's not an Lego hoodie, it's a work of art. I get turned on by my reflection in passing cars.
Lyrics like that could put you in a trance, just a beautiful stack of steaming horse shit. Luckily for all of us, his music is far from what's important in this video, because last week, allegation had surfaced towards Wilbur being abusive. Overall, this freak of nature to one of his ex-partners, who is a fellow YouTuber and streamer that goes by the name of Shubble. How all of this started was Shubble's kicking up a live stream detailing an experience that she's been quite confused along with disturbed by for quite some time, over a past relationship she shared. I want to make it clear she did not name drop one person throughout the entirety of this live stream, keeping the alleged abuser anonymous, which I think will be important to note for what will be shown soon. Shubbles would continue on how she was dating who we know now as Wilbur, felt the equivalent of dating Hannibal Lecter, claiming to have this absurd obsession with biting her that started off as playful, but quickly turned horrifyingly violent to where he would act like he contracted the mad snail disease, completely ripping chunks of her skin out with his teeth.
I thought that it was just like a constant accident that he kept hurting me, but he's not hitting me. And it didn't start as something that he did to hurt me. He had this habit of biting, which is so weird to me now, but he said that he had had this habit since he was a kid, and even his mom said that that was true. And he said it was just affectionate.
With all due respect to Shubbles, because I do know love can be deeply blinding, how the hell was that not the reason to cut the rope right there and then? Somebody's mother provided me some old legend of my partner turning into a flesh-eating werewolf. I'm running until the cows come home. That is the last day I talked to that entire family, because I would have believed I ran into the Sawyer. Shubbles would continue on to claim Wilbur was doing all of the biting just out of affection, and never to hurt her, which quickly grew aggressive to where sinking his teeth into her skin became one of his favorite hobbies, enjoying her screaming in pain, even reaching a point to where Shelby would create a safe word for them to use whenever Wilbur was hurting her, which he would constantly disregard.
Accidents of him biting too hard and really hurting me happened more and more frequently. But he always seemed genuinely sorry, and he decided that he didn't want to keep accidentally hurting me. So we were going to use a safe word, so he could learn where my limit was, where my pain tolerance ended. And saying that out loud now doesn't sound like that's not very sound logic.
Don't get me wrong, whenever stuff goes down and you want to take a little nibble to turn your freak on, there's nothing wrong with that if everyone's cool with it. But obviously Shelby is claiming that's not the case. To me, it really feels like Wilbur knew exactly what he was doing by even creating a safe word in the first place so he could control his animalistic urges to eat his girlfriend. The safe word sort of seems like this plan of false hope he tried to grow into Shelby's mind in order to manipulate her into believing his intentions were somewhat pure. I mean, he was whispering in her ear about how he was only doing it out of love, despite Shelby repeating to him multiple times that it really hurts her physically and emotionally in the relationship. She would also say how much trust she lost for him by having Wilbur start deeming it all for her being overdramatic and exaggerating how hard he was biting her.
I didn't like being hurt all the time, and I needed him to really stop biting so hard. I didn't like it, and I tried telling him over and over again because he wasn't actually trying at all to not hurt me. But he said he would try at first. And then he started saying things like, it was my pain tolerance that was too low, or I'm exaggerating how much it actually hurts. He's not even biting that hard. I'm being dramatic.
Shifting the blame towards everybody but yourself for problems you started is just some textbook narcissism. From what it sounds like here, he's throwing any sort of excuse he can think of that removes accountability from himself, biting necks off like a World War Z zombie. Getting off to watching people scream for you to stop is some psychotic Arkham Asylum style shit. And this wouldn't be only a private ordeal either. Shelby would detail on how Wilbur would also chomp on her in public. Whether it be an outing or somewhere with their friends, Wilbur would persist to gobble her off like Dracula. Now you might be wondering how this act of cannibalism was even allowed in public. Well, that's because Shelby herself would try to laugh it off to not make a scene or cause anybody to worry, lying and playing it off with a giggle when in reality she was screaming internally.
Disguised it as this really quirky part of our relationship and was so comfortable sharing it with his friends to the point that he would do it in front of them. He thought it was this really funny story to tell and a good bit to take my arm and bite me in front of everybody until I literally shout in pain. And then I have to laugh it off because I'm so embarrassed and I don't want to cause a scene in front of all of our friends. And I'm sure everyone was a little bit uncomfortable, but as long as I was saying that it was fine, nobody really felt like they needed to be concerned, and that's not anybody's fault.
Now, there isn't exactly, from what I can see, a public clip that shows an instance of this happening, but what you can easily stumble upon is other women, some being close friends of Wilbur, backing up Shelby's story, sharing their own experiences with Wilbur uncontrollably biting them as well.
However, as Twitter would very quickly point out, there have been several instances of creators who knew Wilbur personally who have come out on the record to claim that he had a history of biting.
Wilbur Soot has bitten me harder than that.
Yeah.
He just bites everyone. He'd bite you.
He never bit me when I met him.
He would.
To me? Yeah. He keeps biting me.
Christ, hand this man a fucking chew toy. It's really hard to convince me this is some great grand conspiracy to slander his name along with Image Down. I don't really see the reality of Shelby lying about it when it's been a pattern he's done for multiple years from multiple women's accounts, not to mention his own mother warning her about it. I'm aware Minx doesn't even remember her own birthday or what she ate yesterday, so her word about drama is never really the one to take. But these other streamers haven't done anything to ruin their reputation as far as I know, so I don't really think all this shit is some mystical fairy tale created to destroy the internet empire he created. Shelby eventually would get to mention the end of this relationship where she describes living in fear every day, reaching to the point where she would begin vomiting from all the anxiety that was built up due to Wilbur's constant neglect towards her, begging for him to stop, and just her overall emotions in general. He would continue to allegedly abuse her even worse than before, now not even apologizing anymore, instead choosing to chomp down even harder whenever Shelby would use a safe word, and pull some sadistic shit where he would poke at her bruises afterwards with a smile that stretched from ear to ear.
I couldn't even tell you the last time he had apologized for doing it anymore, because now sometimes he would bite me and I would yell out the safe word because it hurt so bad, and he'd clamp down even harder, and just for a second, just for good measure, before letting go. And sometimes I'd say the safe word and he'd grind his teeth down on my skin, and sometimes he'd smile after, like a gloating grin. And during this time, I was filled with so much anxiety all the time that I was constantly nauseous, gagging daily, on occasion throwing up because of the pit that was in my stomach.
Now, of course, whenever Shelby brought up her discomforts with Wilbur feeling this way, he would always reassure her with the classic of saying he was her shining knight in armor that would do everything in his power to not hurt her, even going as far to say he loves her more than she loves him, delivering poems that would indicate how this woman was his God-given soulmate, basically constantly love-bombing her in order for her not to leave or go anywhere, before ending it all off with him claiming that he will never change and that he's simply who he is.
I felt so unwanted and ignored. And I would tell him that, and then he would reassure me that he wanted to be together and he loved me. He loved me more than I loved him, even. He would always insist that that was true, like that. I love you more. But he was like really serious about it. And looking back, I do believe that the way I was swept off my feet at the beginning of this relationship was 100% love bombing. And when I asked him to stop again, this time he said, "This is who he is. He isn't going to change." Those were his words.
The relationship finally came to a giant close whenever Wilbur left for some reason. I don't really know if it was because they lived in different countries or he was on a business trip. I don't know the specifics, but finally Shelby sort of hit a boiling point where Wilbur told her he would rather pursue fame and money over wanting to fix the relationship, besides calling her his soulmate that he could never leave the night prior. She would decide to eventually break things off between the two, not even wanting to end things in the first place. She would provide multiple solutions for the two to try to work out their struggles, which he would immediately shut down, refusing to come up with any solution, labeling it as more of a responsibility to be with her than a loving relationship.
Insisted he did not want to break up. So he was expecting me to have a solution somehow magically, and I gave a number of solutions that would have a way forward for us to be together, but he refused to make any compromise whatsoever. And he said that the relationship was starting to feel like a responsibility.
Well, fuck me raw on a seesaw. Going off of this, it's insane that he's the one to unironically label it as a responsibility. Like it was an absolute burden on his part that he could no longer torment her anymore until she screams in pain. Like that was somehow her fault in the first place. The rest of this we cry together ass love story ends with Shelby stating she only recently processed this pattern to be abuse after having multiple talks with therapists and people in her inner circle.
I shared my story with a lot of friends after I started talking to therapists, and I was like, so this thing happened and I wasn't really sure. It just seems weird now to me looking back, and all of them told me exactly what was happening in the words that I was too afraid to use. And I was being hurt in my last relationship. It took me all of that time to see it through that lens.
After this, Wilbur's community immediately turned on him, having his Discord being completely shut down, thousands of subs being lost, and having his own moderation team step down too. Tommy Innit came out with a tweet in support of Shelby, announcing he would be talking about the issue soon. Dream decided to tell Wilbur he bit off more than he could chew, disowning his friend, calling the response dishonest. Wackety, being close to Wilbur, made an announcement where it sounded like he was almost holding back tears, telling everybody Wilbur would be removed from his important SMP.
This next topic is very difficult for me to process, and it's an extremely sensitive thing, and I was waiting for the correct time for me, but that can wait no longer, and I need to let everyone know that Wilbur is no longer part of the QSMP.
Pretty odd story from start to finish. Shelby made it sound like Wilbur was some sort of extraterrestrial, like he was Goku or some shit. But with strong allegations like this that frame him to be some sort of Little Red Riding Hood ass fairy tale beast, I believe he would do everything in his power to shut these allegations down. That would be if Shelby mentioned his name once throughout the entire video like I said previously. She treated Wilbur like he was fucking Voldemort, not mentioning him as the abuser once. There was a lot of speculation surrounding his name, but ultimately he would be the one to practically out himself, making his defense I guess him being gay the whole time, because all he would do is bend over to be prepared to take it up the ass, not throwing any sort of counter evidence at all, admitting to him being the infamous Minecraft muncher right off the bat, deciding not even to show any sincerity by not using her name throughout the circus show of an apology, which you might think is hypocritical of me to say since Shelby didn't use his name either. However, with Wilbur going over the immense guilt he feels towards how he treated this supposed person, bawling about all the therapy sessions he's been going to, throwing the usual saggy titty self-pity committee typically guilty people hold for themselves in order to try to gain some public sympathy, it just doesn't come off as genuinely sincere. I feel like the least you could do is actually mention the person's name that you hurt, or a great start would be to actually say the words "I'm sorry" before the conclusion of your 2-page self-sucking sermon. Without any more blabbering, let's break down this response and see why R. Kelly making a song called "Showering You in Love" towards the kid he pissed on would be better than this. So Wilbur kicks it off by saying, "In the past week, a series of allegations have been made over my conduct from an ex-girlfriend. I want to emphasize that, although I feel it is fair to offer my perspective, this person's feelings are completely valid.
This nigga serious?
I have taken my time sharing this statement as I wanted to process and respond respectfully and with the hope to gain a deeper understanding for the situation." Wow, right off the gate you come out blowing a queef right through your teeth. Stop lying. You did not sit down with your pen and quill over the campfire to take your sweet time. It's fucking 2 pages. Also, why would you not start this out by claiming this shit was false, or in the very least double down on Shelby being dramatic about it? I mean, the way I see it, or my viewpoint about it, if you're truly innocent, you'd almost fight to the death to prove so, not sadly say, "I took a lot of time to find out it was fair to defend myself. Her feelings are pretty reasonable, but don't get it wrong everybody, I'm innocent." Like, it just makes you look even more guilty being passive about it rather than come in hot to disprove everything. If you don't want your career to go poof, show the proof. During our relationship's final months, I regrettably became slobbish, disrespectful, and selfish. These actions caused a lot of pain to my ex-girlfriend, and I've since sought therapy to address these behaviors, making significant lifestyle changes to rectify my past actions. I've come to realize how much my past behavior hurt this person, but I truly, compassionately believe I have made great strides from the person I once was and hope I can continue to grow and improve on this trajectory. Why is this word like my arch nemesis? I mean, there's just no soul in this reply. It looks like it came right out of ChatGPT. If you came to realize how badly your actions were, why won't you acknowledge or dedicate your response towards Shelby moving forwards rather than making it all about yourself? The last thing I would ever think to do after admitting to causing this person pain would be to create this Legend of Thorfinn ass story about myself, leaving my violent past in order to find the true path to peace. The allegation of abuse, particularly in the form of biting, deeply shocked me. Throughout our relationship, I understood from our numerous conversations and text messages exchanges on the subject that this behavior was consensual, playful, and reciprocally enjoyed. I truly believe those personal message exchanges reflect mutual affection and understanding. Out of respect for her, I choose not to publish them, and I emphasize my perspective is not shared to diminish or invalidate anyone's feeling. This is the part right here that makes me fully believe Wilbur is chromosexual, because how are you going to pull some Joe McCarthy shit on all of us, claiming to have this mountain of evidence to shut this entire operation down, then just selectively doesn't post it? I'm having a hard time understanding why somebody would want to blueball their own reputation like this, unless they're lying about having any evidence at all. Secondly, from Shelby's account, y'all had to create a whole ass passcode in order for you not to hurt her, which still got completely ignored. Shelby, in her response to Wilbur's, even pointed out the absurdity of this statement, claiming there was no DMs ever to back up what Wilbur was saying here, pointing out he knew exactly what he was doing by switching from biting her arms to her legs so nobody would be suspicious of what was happening between the two. While I may perceive our interactions differently, I recognize that this person has processed and expressed feelings of hurt. I want to extend my sincerest apologies for any pain that I caused. So there it finally is. Almost at the end of the entire statement, he waits to apologize. Now, although he didn't downright admit to abuse itself, rather him being a poor boyfriend, the implications made throughout the response, I think we can all collectively agree, made him look much worse. It's either an all or nothing situation where you try your hardest to show how you're clean, or deeply consider the dirty shit you've done to people and make your best effort to show how sorry you are for it. Not just to entirely fence sit on your own allegations, playing for both sides, then claiming you'll show a bunch of things to present next to nothing afterwards. The community as a whole was enraged with this response, filled with messages of him being self-centered, a monster for making the whole thing about him, one of those people being Little Tay for some reason, calling him a narcissist. As I mentioned previously, Shelby would see this apology and come out with another response of her own. Reading Wilbur's already felt like a Bible scripture, but Shelby would write out a Harry Potter novel calling the apology mediocre and disingenuous, restating that it wasn't the fact of her being bit that she was upset about, it was her being hurt, which to her Wilbur treated as nothing but a joke. And some more things, I mean, if you want to read it for yourself, feel free by pausing, because I try to be a YouTuber and not an audiobook. If you were to think this story would wrap up there though, you would be sadly mistaken, because only a few days after the allegations, a girl by the name of Alice would come out with her own accusations on Twitter that would quickly blow up because somehow it makes Wilbur look a whole tenfold worse than what he did before. Keep in mind, these are nothing but allegations and not 100% confirmed to be true, as Wilbur never even responded to these as of yet. I mean, look at this shit. If we go onto the little PowerPoint presentation cover she for some reason made, you can see the little list of everything she's been affected by. And it's not exactly a short one. So Alice starts this off by saying, "These past few years have been difficult, but I finally feel safe enough to speak about my experience with Wilbur." Proceeding to explain whenever the two began a relationship back in 2019, she was filled with constant love bombing whenever the couple first started, which is a pattern you can pick up when looking back at Shelby's claims, because she admits to Wilbur doing the very same thing at their start. She claims one of Wilbur's close friends tried to warn her about the dangers that can come with this man that she would regrettably ignore, going on to label him as a control freak, detailing the fact that he would go out of his way to ensure the relation between them would be kept off the internet, saying it was for her safety. Now, this is minuscule to what she's going to accuse him of next. The secret she's referring to is Wilbur not announcing he has a new girlfriend. I really don't see this particularly being the best reason to show how he was controlling. On the slim chance of Wilbur actually telling the truth about doing it for her safety, he would have some pretty good reasons to. I mean, everybody has their rights to privacy. Just because they're in a public spotlight doesn't mean everything they do outside of their content has to be public as well, which includes their love life. And I'm referring to this if both parties agree to keep the relationship private. However, if Alice didn't, even with Wilbur's reassurance, I still feel like she had the choice to leave the relationship if she felt so strongly about this. Alice would go on to say she was forced to sit silently and hide away whenever he streams, which is, yeah, pretty odd. I mean, you can keep things private, but that doesn't mean you have to start treating her like a fucking dog, telling her to go sit in a corner. She would later state, "In the last few months, he made me feel extremely unlovable and unwanted. I had suffered from self-harm tendencies back in 2019. He ignored the marks on my body and only took interest in retelling his own life struggle." It almost seems like he was making it a damn competition to be more depressed depressed than her, rather than to actually console her and try to work these issues out. Sort of like what we saw from Shelby. If this is true, then this is a terrible look, because if your own girlfriend wanting to off herself wouldn't make you care about somebody in the slightest, then what the hell possibly will, besides a mirror? The last thing I could imagine is to go cut for cut with my partner to see who's really about it more, or to downplay whatever she's going through for your own sob story. Alice continued to claim she was another animal in the food chain for Wilbur to consume, going through the very same biting treatment Shelby went through. Then she states, after a while I noticed that it was always me putting the effort into the relationship, so I decided one day to not be the one to message first, just to see what would happen, and he never spoke to me again, so the relationship dissolved. This man is acting like he's a top member of the CIA. If my girl randomly stopped texting me for a period of time, not a few hours, I'm talking days, I'm not gonna have some Hoodville bitches ain't shit moment about it thinking she played me. I'm doing the bare minimum and ringing her phone up 100 times to check if she's even still alive. This person had to be nothing but dirt for Wilbur for him not to even send out a damn question mark about the sudden silence or to check if she was even okay. Alice would be enticed to meet up again with Wilbur after 2 years of being radio silent towards her to finally get some closure about what happened, where she began to tell this horrific story. We went to a bar and talked, and then he proceeded to get me very drunk. He got us an Uber back to his house. I ended up blacking out in his bed due to all the alcohol, but the last thing I remember is him non-consensually removing my clothes. The next morning he proceeded to tell me that I must be lesbian because I wasn't interested in him. Now if this is true, yeah, he's done for. He ripped off somebody's clothes that was completely plastered and unable to say or do anything to stop it, then had the audacity to call her lesbian for not liking it. If he responds to this and decides to pull out his little respect card in order for him not to show any evidence, I really think this could possibly be the final nail in the coffin, because he's just not going to defend himself. He's basically letting them win by forfeit. Trust me, this is not going unnoticed, with the tweet itself having over 5 million views and counting. Alice would end this allegation off by saying how traumatized she was seeing everybody praise a man that's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and saying how staying silent about it wasn't finding her any peace and only keeping his, and then finally plugging her channel at the end of it, which I find a little weird, especially when the same post with her links has her sharing about how overwhelmed she is towards the internet's response. Then she went on to say she would be angry if any YouTube drama channel makes a video and monetizes off her trauma. But I mean, you posted a career-ending accusation towards a YouTuber with 6 million subs, really don't know what the fuck else you would expect to happen. Yeah, it's pretty big news. However, it really doesn't discredit anything she has said though in this allegation. There's not any proof of her lying, just one questionable choice she did after she decided to release them. And that's really where this entire story ends from there. There's always two sides to every conflict, but with Wilbur having a horrible response for one situation and no response for the other, it really makes it hard to even consider joining Wilbur's side during all of this. With Shelby and Alice having the support from the entire dreamsmp crew who knew Wilbur personally, it's difficult to paint these women as twisted liars that are trying to drag his name down to bring theirs up. There's no more running Wilbur could do. The first instance with Shelby I feel like could have been forgotten about in a matter of weeks like everything else on the internet, but with another coming out describing you as being worse than before, it's going to be hard to forget, because now he's starting to show a pattern in doing this to multiple people. So that's what his legacy will be known for now, instead of all of his accomplishments that he worked hard for over a decade. Quite sad how somebody with this large of an influence turns out to be the opposite of what he preaches. If he creates another response, I'll try to make a video to update you all on the situation. But with that being said, if you guys enjoyed this video or sadly learned something you wish you didn't, slap a like on this video before your dad slaps you. Subscribe if you hit my vibe, and as always, make sure to follow all my socials. The links will be down in the description. And with that being said, I will catch you all hella soon. Alright, I'm gonna head out this